Hi, my name is Luna. I'm 33 years old. And tonight, my life is about to collide with a chapter I thought I'd closed for good. It's 7:42 p.m. and I'm standing in the grand glass atrium of the Rainbridge Hotel in downtown Seattle. The lighting is soft but deliberate, casting a warm gold hue across the crowd of executives, entrepreneurs, and investors. A sea of dark suits, polished smiles, and clinking glasses. On paper, it's just another networking night for the tech world. But for me, it's personal. This isn't just any corporate event. This is the opening night of the Seattle Tech Connect Summit, the kind of place where partnerships are born and acquisitions are whispered over wine. It's also the first time I'll see Olivia, my older sister, in nearly 2 years. And she has no idea I'm here. Even more surreal, she has no idea I'm no longer the wandering creative who couldn't hold a job or stick to a major. She doesn't know that I'm now the CEO of Ultima Systems, one of the most promising up-and-coming data management companies on the West Coast. She doesn't know yet. My hands are trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of a moment I didn't think I would ever live to see. You see, Olivia Carter has always been the crown jewel of our family. A real-life LinkedIn success story. At 37, she's already a senior VP at Sterling Capital, a major player in the finance world, Ivy League, featured in Forbes. The kind of woman who owns her power and makes sure everyone in the room knows it. And I've always been, well, Luna, the creative one, the emotional one, the one still figuring it out. Growing up in Denver, Olivia and I lived in the same house but different universes. While she was dominating student council, nailing AP exams, and getting scholarship offers from top schools, I was busy sketching in notebooks, building websites for imaginary bands, and changing my mind about what I wanted to be every other week. She was the achiever. I was the drifter. Our parents loved us both, I think, but they saw Olivia as the investment that had paid off. And me, I was the wild card. The question mark. The girl with big ideas and a messy plan. Over time, I learned to shrink myself to fit the space I was allowed. Even as adults, nothing changed. Olivia climbed the ladder, and I wandered. She bought a townhouse in San Francisco. I rented a studio in Austin. She gave TEDx talks. I blogged about creative burnout and imposter syndrome. Every Thanksgiving, she'd ask loud enough for the whole table to hear, "So, Luna, what are we doing these days? Still freelancing?" She always said we, as if my life were a group project that kept getting resubmitted. And I would smile, sip my wine, and pretend I didn't feel that old sting of shame. But here's what no one saw while Olivia was climbing fast. I was building deep. I was learning, coding, failing, pivoting. I spent nights teaching myself full-stack development from YouTube and trial-by-fire gigs. I started building tools, tiny apps to fix real problems. Some worked, most didn't, but I kept going. Until one day, at a small tech conference in San Diego, I met a man named Jonathan Reeves. He was in his 60s, wore the same navy cardigan every day, and had the quiet gaze of someone who'd seen too many companies rise and fall to be impressed by buzzwords. But he was impressed by me. Not by my resume, God knows that was still a patchwork, but by how I thought, how I solved problems, how I approached code like a canvas. "You think in systems, Luna?" he told me. "That's rare. You don't chase shiny things. You build foundations." Jonathan took a chance on me. He invited me to co-found a company with him, a little startup called Ultima Systems, born in the back of a shared co-working space with 2 whiteboards and a leaky coffee machine. That was 14 months ago. Today, Ultima Systems is debt-free, cash flow positive, and just closed its third healthcare tech contract. We help mid-size businesses manage, encrypt, and protect their data faster and smarter than the big guys. And I'm not the intern. I'm not the junior. I'm not the tag-along little sister. I'm the CEO. But Olivia doesn't know that. And tonight, she's here representing Sterling Capital, the firm that recently added Ultima to its shortlist of possible acquisitions. They don't know I'm leading Ultima, because I asked our press team to keep my name out of the early headlines. I didn't want to be seen yet. I wanted to earn the impact before claiming the spotlight. But tonight, the veil comes off. The room is buzzing with talk about the mysterious woman behind Ultima. People have theories. Some think I'm Jonathan's daughter. Others say I'm just the technical lead. No one guesses I'm the one calling the shots. And that's just how I want it for now. As I step away from the bar and make my way toward the networking floor, I spot Olivia from across the room. Perfect posture. Hair sleek. She's talking to a group of executives, laughing like she belongs there because she does. She hasn't seen me yet, but she will. And what happens next will change both of our lives. You know how some people are just born with gravity? That was Olivia. She didn't walk into a room, she landed, eyes turned. Teacher lit up. Coaches recruited. Even at 9 years old, she had that magnetic watch me shine kind of presence. And me, I was the background music to her spotlight. Our house in Denver was a modest 2-story colonial Stevenings AT-SED, with a creaky front porch and a magnolia tree that split in two after a thunderstorm when I was 12. But inside those walls, we lived in two very different realities. My parents, both former school teachers, believed in discipline, results, and doing something practical with your life. To them, success came in GPA points and early college admissions letters. Naturally, Olivia was their masterpiece. Student body president. National Honor Society. Full ride to Columbia. At every dinner. Every phone call. Every holiday it was Olivia's new title. Olivia's award. Olivia's article in the local paper. My dad even framed her internship acceptance letter from Goldman Sachs. Who frames an internship? And me, I was the one who colored outside the lines. Literally. I used to doodle in the margins of my math tests. Not because I didn't understand, math came easily to me. Actually, but because my mind wandered. I saw problems in pictures, solutions in color. It wasn't that I couldn't keep up. I just ran on a different frequency. But that difference, it didn't translate well in a household that believed life was a ladder and the fastest climber won. By the time Olivia left for college, I was already feeling like I'd lost a race I didn't remember entering. My parents would say things like, "You could be like your sister if you just focused," or, "Olivia always knew what she wanted." I didn't. Not yet. And that made me defective in their eyes. I remember one night in high school, I was 16 sitting at the dinner table, nervously sharing that I wanted to apply to an arts-focused charter school downtown. I'd spent weeks building a portfolio of web mock-ups and design sketches. My mom didn't even look up from her plate. "That's not a real school." "Luna," she said, "you can't make a living drawing websites." But I'm not just drawing, I started trying to explain. "You need to think long-term." My dad interrupted. "Look at Olivia. She's going places." And just like that, the conversation ended. No one asked me what I loved. No one asked why it mattered to me. Because in their eyes, there was only one blueprint for success, and Olivia held the patent. So I followed their plan. I enrolled at Colorado State. Declared a major in economics, like Olivia had. and tried to wear a version of her ambition like an ill-fitting suit. I lasted 3 semesters. I hated every second. I hated the lectures, the forced networking events, the spreadsheet assignments that felt like building walls instead of bridges. One day, I skipped my intermediate microeconomics midterm and sat in a coffee shop sketching a mobile app idea that helped people organize their emotional triggers. It wasn't much, but for the first time in months, I felt alive. When I dropped out, I thought the worst part would be the disappointment in my parents' voices. But it was Olivia's text message that gutted me the most. Tough love, maybe this is a wake-up call. You can't float through life forever. I didn't respond. 6 months later, I enrolled in a UX/UI bootcamp in Austin and moved into a tiny apartment above a taco shop. I worked part-time at a call center during the day and coded at night until my eyes burned. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I didn't want their skepticism. I didn't want their polite pity. I just wanted space to become someone else. Someone real. The funny thing is, failure has a way of becoming your teacher when success refuses to speak your name. I failed a lot. I took freelance gigs for barely any money. Built ugly websites. Crashed prototypes. Got ghosted by clients. I taught myself how to write better contracts. Ask sharper questions. Read source code with one eye open at 3 a.m. It was messy, unglamorous, and silent. But for the first time, it was mine. Olivia, meanwhile, was being interviewed by Fast Company and buying her second condo in San Francisco. Our lives couldn't have looked more different. And yet, every time I saw her success, a tiny voice inside me whispered, "That will never be you." It wasn't jealousy. It was resignation. She was the woman everyone believed in. The one who made the family proud. The one with direction. Polish. Credentials. I was the messy little sister who never stayed still long enough to be taken seriously. Even after I started gaining traction landing steady contracts. Leading design teams. I never shook that feeling. When I'd visit home for Christmas, my parents still asked Olivia all the questions. I was just doing tech stuff. A phrase they used with the same tone as dabbling in crystals. But something was shifting. I started realizing that maybe, just maybe, being different didn't make me lesser. Maybe it made me. Me. When Jonathan offered me a shot at something bigger, I hesitated. Not because I didn't think I could handle it, but because I wasn't sure I deserved it. Imposter syndrome doesn't whisper and lisper. It screams. But he believed in me, and slowly, I started believing in myself. Now, as I stand in this Seattle hotel's CEO badge in my purse, my name's still unknown. I feel something I haven't felt in years. Power. Not the kind you flex. The kind you own quietly. Because you earned it in dark rooms and silent fights no one else saw. And tonight, Olivia's going to see it. If there's one thing Olivia Carter knows how to do, it's work. A room. I watched her from across the ballroom as she held court in a half-moon circle of power suits. She wore a tailored, dark emerald dress that looked like it belonged on the cover of Fortune. And her smile polished. Deliberate. Flashed like a camera shutter every time someone cracked a joke she didn't find funny. Her body language was effortless, head slightly tilted, arms relaxed. Glass of white wine held just low enough to appear approachable. This wasn't just Olivia being social. This was Olivia performing influence. I recognized the choreography because I'd spent years studying it at dinner tables. At graduations. At every holiday where she commanded the spotlight while I hovered by the dip tray, wondering if anyone remembered I existed. But tonight was different. I wasn't the side note. I wasn't the +1 or the freelancing sister who's into tech stuff. I was here because I earned it. And Olivia had no idea. Luna Carter, a voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned and found myself face to face with a young man in a sharp navy suit, holding a clipboard and wearing a Summit lanyard. Yes, hi. We're finalizing the introductions for tonight's executive showcase. Just confirming you're speaking on behalf of Ultima Systems at 8:30, I nodded. Pulse steady. That's right. He checked something off his list and smiled. Looking forward to it. We've had a lot of buzz around your company. Some big names in the room tonight. As he disappeared into the crowd, I caught one last glimpse of Olivia. She was gesturing animatedly toward the far end of the room, probably giving her elevator pitch on Sterling Capital's strategy for tech diversification. I wondered if she knew that Ultima was on Sterling's radar. Probably. Olivia knew everything except the fact that the mystery CEO of that company was her little sister. And that reveal was coming soon. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water and made my way toward a quieter corner of the room. Small groups clustered around high-top tables, discussing venture capital, SaaS integration, machine learning. A few recognized me from press releases, but didn't quite connect the dots. That's what I'd wanted for Ultima's work to speak before my name did. But now the clock was ticking. Olivia Carter, someone called nearby. And I instinctively turned toward her again. She was greeting Peter Lang, a well-known board member from a major VC firm. Olivia's laugh rang out, confident and practiced. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, you're not here to compete with her. You're here because you belong. Then it happened. Our eyes met. For a second, her smile froze not from recognition, but confusion. Like she was seeing someone who didn't belong in this space. Her gaze swept over me heels to blouse, and the pin to clutch before the smile snapped back in place. Luna, she called out, voice laced with amused surprise. Wow. I didn't expect to see you here. Her tone was friendly on the surface, but underneath it, sharp as a paper cut. I walked over, calm and controlled. Hi. Olivia. It's been a while. You could say that. She replied, leaning in for a quick, camera-friendly hug. What brings you to Tech Connect? Before I could answer, she turned to the group beside her. Everyone. This is my sister, Luna. She works in tech design. Right. I smiled politely. Close. Oh. Sorry, was it development now? You change roles so often I lose track. There it was. The dig. Subtle. Effortless. And delivered with a grin. The people around her chuckled lightly, unsure whether to take it as a joke. I didn't flinch. I'm still in tech. I replied smoothly. I'll be speaking later tonight. Actually, Olivia blinked. You're speaking as part of the showcase, I nodded. Well, that's fantastic, she said, drawing out the word like it had too many syllables. Networking opportunity, I tilted my head slightly, something like that, before she could press further. Someone from the summit staff approached and asked her to check in with the Sterling delegation. She gave me a quick air kiss and disappeared into the crowd, already recentering herself in the orbit of more powerful planets. I exhaled. Not because I'd survived seeing her, but because for the first time ever, I hadn't shrunk in her presence. At 8:27, I stood backstage with my notes in hand. Not that I needed them. I'd been living this story, breathing it, building it from scratch with my own hands. I didn't need to memorize my truth. I just needed to speak it. As my name was called, please welcome Luna Carter, CEO of Ultima Systems. I stepped out under the lights. The applause was polite, curious. From the stage, I could see Olivia standing with her colleagues near the back of the room, wine glass in hand. Mid-sip, she froze. The expression on her face was pure cinema confusion, morphing into shock. Then, something that almost looked like disbelief. I smiled, not smug. Not vengeful. Just present. This time, last year, I began. I was working on product prototypes at 3 a.m. in a cramped apartment over a taco joint in Austin, Texas. I didn't have investors. I didn't have titles. But I had an idea and a mentor who believed in me when I barely believed in myself. I told them about the journey, about late nights and lost contracts, about Jonathan Reeves, about building Ultima with more determination than resources. I spoke plainly. No buzzwords. Just truth. And I watched Olivia the whole time. Not to get revenge, but to finally see her see me. When I finished, the room applauded. Some stood. Investors I didn't know approached me immediately afterward. Journalists asked for interviews. Tech leaders handed me business cards with offers to talk more. And Olivia, she stood in place, motionless, like a painting caught off guard. I walked over. My expression kind but grounded. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, "You're the CEO." I nodded. "Yes, I am." She didn't know what to say. But this time, I did. For the first time in her life, Olivia didn't know what to say. She just stood there, her lips parted slightly. Eyebrows drawn in a rare display of uncertainty. The woman who always had a comeback. A fact sheet. A flawless retort. Was speechless. "You're the CEO," she had whispered. More to herself than to me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't feed the silence with a triumphant monologue. Though part of me, the hurt little sister, wanted to. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Yes, I am." And then I walked away. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted her to feel small. But because for the first time, I no longer needed her to validate who I was. Later that evening, after the event started winding down, I slipped out to the hotel courtyard. The night was cool. Seattle's famous mist clinging to the air like a whisper. I leaned against the stone ledge, looking up at the skyline, letting the adrenaline finally settle. Behind me, footsteps approached light, deliberate. I didn't need to turn around. I didn't know. Olivia said softly. I looked over my shoulder. She wasn't wearing that polished, performative smile anymore. Her heels clicked slower than usual. Like even her steps carried uncertainty. I figured. I replied. How long? She asked, folding her arms not defensively. Just gently. About 18 months since I started Ultima, I said. About 8 since we broke profitability. She looked down, nodding. I saw the articles, but I didn't realize it was you. You didn't use your last name in the press? On purpose. I said, I wanted the work to speak for itself. There was a pause. A long one. You were incredible up there. She admitted. I mean it. I exhaled. Not from relief, but from a strange mixture of grief and peace. I used to dream of hearing you say that. I confessed. When I was younger, back when everything I did felt like it existed in your shadow. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. They were glossy. I'm sorry, she said, and the words landed heavier than I expected. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I guess I was so busy trying to prove myself that I didn't see what was happening right next to me. I turned toward her. "You know what's funny," I said. "I spent so long chasing some version of success that would finally make you. Mom. Dad, everyone take me seriously. And when it happened, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt whole." She gave a sad smile. "You don't need us to see you anymore." "No," I said softly. "But I still want you to." That broke something in her. She stepped forward, slowly, and leaned beside me on the ledge. "You were always different," she said, eyes fixed ahead. "Not in a bad way. Just on your own frequency." And I didn't know how to tune into it. I thought success had to look a certain way, that it had to come with Ivy League degrees and boardroom titles, and I thought it had to come from proving you wrong. I said, "But it turns out, it only came when I stopped trying to be anything other than me." She let out a breath. "I've spent years coaching people on leadership and innovation. Turns out, the most innovative leader in the room was the one I underestimated." We both chuckled. The kind of laugh you let out when something tender finally breaks open. "You think Mom and Dad will ever get it?" I asked after a while. She smiled. "Eventually. They still think my job is to take over the world, one financial merger at a time. But give them a few more headlines with your name, and they'll come around. I'm not doing it for headlines." "I know," she said. "And that's exactly why you'll outlast all of us." A long silence fell between us. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was still peaceful. Two sisters. No longer on different ladders. Just standing side by side on solid ground. "I'm proud of you, Luna," she said finally, "not because of what you built, but because of who you had to become to build it." I looked at her and saw, for the first time, not the flawless big sister, but a woman who had also been fighting her own unseen battles. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." We stood like that for a while, watching the city hum beneath the stars. Eventually, she glanced at her phone and gave a wry smile. "I should get going," she said. "Sterling's team wants a post-summit debrief Claude the des Olar." I nodded. "Of course. Duty calls." She turned to leave, then paused. "Luna, yeah. Next time you build something world-changing, loop me in earlier. Not because I can help, but because I'd like a front-row seat." I smiled. "You've got it." And with that, she walked back inside, at heels clicking with a little less certainty but a lot more humanity. I stayed in the courtyard for a while longer, watching the mist rise above the city, somewhere deep inside. A chapter was closing, and a new one without rivalry, without shadows, was just beginning. Some people lead with volume, others with power. I chose to lead with presence. The Monday after Tech Connect, our office felt different. It wasn't just the congratulatory emails or the flurry of investor calls flooding my assistant's inbox. It was the energy in the hallways. The interns stood a little taller. The engineers moved with a spring in their step. People were proud, not just of the company, but of the journey behind it. I walked through the glass doors of Ultima HQ, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other, and paused to take it all in. 3 years ago, this had been a dream scribbled on a diner napkin. Now it was real. 28 employees, 3 patents pending, and a growing product line revolutionizing real-time collaboration in remote industries. But the success didn't make me feel invincible. It made me feel responsible. "Morning, Luna," a voice called from behind a monitor. It was Jason. our youngest software architect. Barely 23. Brilliant. Awkward. And full of questions he was afraid to ask. Hey! Jay. I smiled. Stepping into the break room. How's the module redesign coming along? He lit up. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Do you have 5 minutes? I checked my watch. My morning was slammed, but I remembered what it felt like to have your voice lost in a sea of more important things. For you, always. We sat by the window, and he nervously explained his idea for a new integration layer that could improve our processing speed by 30%. It was smart. Really smart. But it was also risky. Look, he said, pushing his glasses up. I know it's not the roadmap, but I ran the data 3 times. I think it's worth the build. I didn't interrupt. I didn't challenge him. I just asked one question. Do you believe in it? He looked up. Surprised. Yeah. I do. Then go for it. I said, you've got 3 days. Build a demo. Show me what belief looks like in code. His face lit up like I'd handed him the keys to the city. That's when it hit me. This moment was what leadership really looked like. It wasn't about controlling outcomes. It was about creating a space where people could be bold, even if it meant falling flat sometimes. Because I knew what it was like to have a good idea die in a conference room because someone more senior didn't think you looked the part. I never wanted Ultima to become that kind of place. Later that week, I started something new, something simple. Every Thursday at 4:00 p.m. I hosted a roundtable called the Fire Pit. No agenda. No titles. Just a space where anyone interns. Admin staff. Senior devs could pitch ideas. Share struggles. Or just be heard. The first few sessions were quiet. People were cautious. But by week 4, the energy had shifted. People were showing up early. Bringing snacks. Whiteboarding half-baked ideas. Challenging each other in ways that felt safe. It wasn't just about innovation anymore. It was about ownership. One Thursday, a woman named Maya, our operations lead, spoke up. She'd been quiet since joining 6 months earlier. Always precise. Always polite. I almost didn't come tonight, she said. I've worked at 3 startups where the founders only pretended to listen. I figured this would be more of the same. But this, she looked around the circle, then at me. This feels different. I smiled. That's because it is. She paused, then added, I want to propose a new conflict resolution framework for cross-team projects. Something rooted in equity. Not just hierarchy. Would that be okay? Not only okay. I said, it's exactly the kind of leadership this company needs. The room buzzed. Not from applause, but from respect. I left that night with a full heart. That weekend, while walking through Capitol Hill with a warm drink in hand, I passed by a small independent bookstore. Something drew me inside. In the back, near the leadership section, I saw a college student nervously thumbing through titles on management and startups. Her backpack was worn, her hair up in a messy bun. She looked a lot like me 6 years ago. She picked up a book with the word disruption in bold red letters. I smiled and said gently, that one's loud. But if you want something real, try this instead. I handed her a lesser-known book about values-based leadership written by a nonprofit founder who built an empire on compassion. She blinked. Thank you. I'm trying to figure out how to lead without becoming someone I'm not. I chuckled. The trick isn't to lead like someone else. It's to lead like the person you needed when you were just starting out. She looked at me differently after that, like I wasn't just some stranger with coffee and advice, but a mirror into what might be possible. As I walked out into the chilly evening air, I thought about all the people who had shaped me. The ones who doubted me, the one who believed in me, the ones who hurt me, and the ones who stayed silent when I needed them to speak. All of them had led me here, not just to a title, but to a truth. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice. It's about creating space for voices that were never heard before. And that's who I had become. Not Olivia. Not a better version of her. Just Luna. Fully. Finally, Luna. It had been almost 4 years since I last stood in front of that old red brick house in the suburbs of Denver. The house hadn't changed much. Same rose bushes by the mailbox. Same squeaky gate at the front. But I had changed so completely. So deeply that part of me wasn't sure how to walk through that front door as the person I had become. I stared at the welcome mat for a moment longer than necessary. Then I knocked. My mom answered first. Her silver hair was pinned neatly back. Just like always. She wore the same navy cardigan she used to wear when packing our school lunches. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Luna?" she said, almost in a whisper. "You're early." I smiled. Figured I'd surprise you. She stepped aside without saying more. Her hug came after the door closed behind me tight. Lingering. Quiet. Inside. The house still smelled of lavender and old wood polish. My dad sat on the couch, flipping through the same newspaper he'd read since 1994. When he saw me, he stood, clearing his throat. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Hey, Dad." He looked at me as if he didn't know whether to shake my hand or salute me. In the end, he settled for a pat on the shoulder. I'd told them bits and pieces over the years. That I was starting a company. That it was doing well. That we had investors, clients, buzz. But I hadn't told them everything. I hadn't told them that Ultima was now worth 8 figures. Or that I'd been asked to speak at Stanford next month. Or that people in the industry were calling me a visionary that was lover collationary tasked and also 10 and etter to when. I hadn't told them because, deep down, I wasn't sure it would matter to them. Dinner was chicken pot pie. Classic. Comforting. Filled with silence between bites. "So," my dad finally said, "I saw your picture in the Wall Street Journal last week." I looked up. "You did." He nodded. "CEO. That's something." My mom chimed in gently. "It said you created something that helps small hospitals work faster." "Yeah," I said. "It's being used in over 120 clinics now. Mostly rural." My dad put down his fork. "Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said real success is when the things you build actually help people." I blinked. That was the first compliment I'd heard from him in years. "Thanks, Dad," I said, the words catching in my throat a little. There was a pause. Then he added, "I didn't get it at first. Why you didn't finish grad school? Why you jumped from job to job? I thought you were lost." I nodded. So did I. "But you weren't." "Were you?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. "I was just finding a road no one else could see yet." He nodded again. Slowly. Thoughtfully. After dinner, I sat with my mom in the kitchen while she made tea. "I watched that interview you did," she said, handing me a cup. "Oh, you were calm. Clear. Confident." "Thanks, Mom." She looked at me for a long moment. "I wish I had told you more often how proud I was. I guess I just didn't know how to talk to you when you weren't like Olivia." I looked down at my tea. Then back at her. It's okay. No. It's not, she said softly. But I'm glad you became who you are anyway. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom. The posters were gone. But the ceiling still had the faint outline of glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck there when I was 9. I lay there in the quiet, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. For so long, I had built my worth on proving people wrong. But in that quiet room, I realized something that nearly brought me to tears. I don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Olivia. Not to my parents. Not even to the younger version of me who thought success had to come with applause. Because the real victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the way people spoke in our office. In the fire I saw in Jason's eyes when he pitched his idea. In the way Maya held herself during that presentation. In every woman who emailed me after a talk and said, "You made me believe I could too." That's what mattered. That's what lasted. The next morning, I stood in the backyard. The swing set was still there. Though rust had claimed most of its shine, I ran my fingers along the chain. Remembering long summer nights when I used to swing so high it felt like I could kick the stars. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." To the struggle. To the silence. To every no that became the soil for my yes. And as I walked back into the house to say goodbye, I didn't feel like the underdog anymore. I felt like a woman who had come home not to seek approval, but to bring light. The invitation came in the most unexpected way. It was a short email, just 4 lines from the dean of students at a small liberal arts college in Vermont. "We've followed your story. Our students need to hear it. We're hosting a leadership summit for first-generation entrepreneurs. Would you be our closing keynote?" At first, I almost didn't reply. I'd never thought of myself as a speaker. I was a builder. A doer. Not someone who stood in front of rooms full of strangers holding a microphone. But something about that phrase, first-generation entrepreneurs, tugged at me. That had been me. Hadn't it? The girl with no blueprint. No map. No mentor. Just a dream and 100 unanswered questions. So I said yes. 2 months later, I stood backstage at the Franklin Auditorium. My palms slightly damp. My throat dry. I could hear the murmur of a few hundred students, kids who were just like I had once been, filling the air with expectation. The event coordinator tapped my shoulder. "You're on in 30. I nodded. Took a deep breath. And stared at myself in the mirror one last time. No blazer. No heels. Just a soft navy sweater. Jeans. And my worn leather boots. I wanted to show up as me. Not as a polished executive. Not as a LinkedIn success story. Just Luna. When they called my name, the applause was polite, curious. Maybe even cautious. I walked to the center of the stage, smiled gently, and spoke the words I hadn't rehearsed, but had carried in my heart for years. "Hi. My name is Luna." That simple sentence echoed across the room. I paused. Let it land. I used to think that if I said that out loud in a room like this, people would laugh. Or worse, they'd ask, "Who?" There were chuckles. Nods. Good. They were with me. Growing up, I was never the one picked for group projects. I wasn't valedictorian. I wasn't the one teachers wrote glowing recommendations for. I was quiet, creative, a little lost. And I came from a family that didn't really know what to do with someone like me. I told them about the jobs I jumped between. About being told I wasn't leader material. About the conference where I walked in invisible and walked out a founder. I watched faces shift as I spoke, walls breaking, eyes softening, a sense of recognition spreading through the room like warmth. Then I said something I hadn't planned. You know the moment everything changed for me. They leaned in. It wasn't when we hit our first million in revenue, or when I made the cover of that tech magazine. It wasn't even when my big sister told me she was proud of me for the first time. I paused. Let silence do what words sometimes can't. It was when a young developer on my team asked me if I believed in his idea. And I said, yes. And I meant it. I looked out across the room. That's the kind of power you hold. Not just the power to do things, but the power to see people, to believe in them when they don't yet believe in themselves. To lead with heart in a world that too often leads with ego. The auditorium was still. You could feel the shift, like something sacred had been stirred. I closed with a question. What if your biggest calling isn't to impress the world, but to create the kind of world where someone like you doesn't have to beg to belong? When I stepped off stage, something strange happened. Students stood. They clapped not just out of politeness, but from something deeper. Some had tears in their eyes. Others just nodded, like they'd heard something they didn't even know they needed. Backstage, the dean hugged me. That was more than a speech. She said, that was a mirror. And then the students came, not to get selfies or business cards. They came to talk, to open up. One girl told me she'd been planning to drop out the next week. I didn't think I had what it takes. She whispered, but maybe. I just need to stop hiding. A young man told me he'd been rejected from 3 incubators. I kept thinking maybe I'm not cut out for this. He said, but then I heard you say the roadmap can start in a diner with no Wi-Fi. And I thought, hell. Maybe I've got a shot. Their stories kept coming. I stayed for hours. That night, back in my hotel room, I looked out the window at the Vermont hills dusted with early snow. My inbox was already filling with more invites, more interviews, more people asking me to tell my story. But for the first time, it didn't feel like my story anymore. It belonged to all of us, to everyone who had ever been overlooked, doubted, dismissed, to every person who needed someone to say, yes, I see you. Keep going. I opened my notebook and scribbled down a phrase. The real revolution begins when we stop performing and start connecting. And in that quiet moment, I knew I hadn't just built a company. I was building a movement. They don't warn you about the silence. Not the one before the crowd claps. Not the silence of waiting. I'm talking about the silence after the applause. It's strange. You can walk off stage, still feeling the warmth of the spotlight on your back? Your name echoing in hashtags. DMs flooding with gratitude, and yet when you sit alone in your hotel room, it's just quiet. Too quiet. 3 weeks after the Vermont speech, I was back at Ultima HQ. The office was thriving. Our client list was growing faster than we could onboard. Investors were doubling down. We'd even been approached for a potential acquisition. And yet I felt hollow. It wasn't burnout. It wasn't fear. It was something more disorienting than either. It was emptiness. I kept asking myself questions I couldn't answer. Why do I feel like I'm drifting? Is this it? Is this success? What am I chasing now at first? I tried to ignore it. I buried myself in work. Took back-to-back meetings. Launched new campaigns. Signed on for more speaking gigs. But the emptiness didn't go away. In fact, it got louder. It came in the form of sleepless nights and blank journal pages. It came in the form of staring at a Google Doc for hours, trying to write something that mattered, and realizing I didn't know what I wanted to say anymore. One Friday night, I stayed late in the office. Everyone else had gone home. I sat in the darkened conference room, staring at the mission statement we'd written 3 years ago back when Ultima was just me and 2 friends. A whiteboard. And too much coffee. We build tools that give power back to the overlooked. That's what it said. I read it again. And again. And suddenly I asked myself, do we still do that somewhere along the way? Our tools had become more about optimization than empowerment. Our product had evolved into something cleaner, sleeker, profitable, but was it still purposeful? Had I, in my pursuit of success, slowly drifted from my why? I went home that night and sat on my living room floor with my old journal, the same one I'd carried during the early startup days. I flipped through page after page of dreams, scribbled frustrations, and raw confessions. And then I landed on an entry dated the 19th of April. Nearly 4 years ago. I don't want to build the biggest thing. I want to build the right thing. I want to create something that heals the gap between potential and opportunity. I sat there, stunned. I had forgotten those words. Forgotten her. That night, I decided to disappear for a while. No big announcement. No digital detox Instagram post. I simply stepped away. I asked Maya to take over operations for 2 weeks. I canceled every speaking engagement. I turned down a major podcast interview and flew out to Big Sur, California, a place I'd visited once when I was 22 and broke. Sleeping in the back of a borrowed car. Dreaming under redwoods. This time, I had a quiet cabin, a stack of books, and no cell service. For the first 2 days, I did nothing. I mean nothing. I stared at trees. I walked barefoot on wet moss. I watched stars emerge like tiny answers in the sky. And slowly, almost like a whisper, I began to feel whole again. Not because of what I had built, not because of what I had achieved, but because I remembered what I had hoped for when I began. One morning, while sitting on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, I whispered aloud. It was never about the company. I said it again. Louder this time. Like a truth breaking through fog. It was about the people it could lift, the voices it could raise, the hands it could steady. In chasing scale, I'd started measuring my worth in downloads, engagement rates, ROI. But the real impact, it couldn't be measured in metrics. It lived in the hospital administrator in rural Kansas who used our platform to coordinate life-saving care in a blackout. It lived in the teacher who used our tools to reconnect with her students during lockdowns. It lived in the single mother in Milwaukee who emailed me to say, I finally feel seen. Thank you. That's what mattered. That's what brought me back. When I returned to Ultima, I didn't come back with a new strategy. I came back with a new intention. We recentered our product development around impact-first metrics. We reallocated resources to support low-income community clinics using our tech. We launched an initiative to fund young entrepreneurs building tools for social good, no strings attached. And I started writing again. Not to market. Not to pitch. Just to speak. To share. To remind others that success without soul is just noise. And slowly, beautifully, the noise faded. In its place came something more powerful. Clarity. 3 years later, I stood at the back of a crowded auditorium in Chicago, watching a young woman take the stage. Her name was Jada Williams, 26. Founder of a health tech startup focused on mental health accessibility for low-income communities. Her company had just crossed its first $1 million in revenue, a milestone I remembered like it happened yesterday. Jada wasn't polished in the traditional sense. Her voice trembled slightly at first. Her blouse had a small wrinkle she hadn't noticed. But her fire, it was unmistakable. You could feel it ripple through the room with every word she spoke. As she told her story about growing up in foster care, I about coding apps in the public library because she couldn't afford a laptop. I saw the audience lean in, just as they had once leaned in for me. And when she said, "I'm standing here because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," I felt tears sting my eyes. Because I knew exactly who she was talking about. After her speech, she found me in the hallway. She didn't say anything at first, just walked up and hugged me. "You changed my life, Luna," she said quietly. "But more than that, you made me believe I could change others' lives too." I swallowed hard. That's the goal. Jada. That was the moment I realized this was the legacy, not the valuation of Ultima, not the press headlines, not the accolades, awards, or standing ovations. But the ripple. The lives touched by your light, who then go on to light others. Months earlier, I'd launched a quiet initiative called the Catalyst Circle, a small, invite-only mentorship and micro-funding program for women of color in tech and social impact. We didn't publicize it. We didn't require pitches or polished decks. We looked for fire, hunger, vision. Jada was one of our first unforgettables. So was Lee May, a robotics engineer from Seattle who built smart prosthetics for children, and Rosa Martinez, who created a platform for immigrant mothers to access legal and emotional support. Each one of them became a new thread in a tapestry I never imagined I'd get to weave. And I finally understood my role had shifted. I was no longer the one climbing the mountain alone. I was now the one holding the rope, steady, whispering to those behind me, "You've got this. I see you. Keep going." There's a quiet joy in that shift, a deeper satisfaction than any standing ovation could give. One night, after a Catalyst Circle retreat in the Colorado mountains, the women built a bonfire under the stars. Someone pulled out a guitar. Someone else started telling stories. And eventually, they turned to me. "Luna?" Yada said, "What would you tell your younger self now?" If she were here, I looked into the fire. The flames danced like memories. For a moment, I saw that girl again sitting alone at a cafe in San Diego. Heartbroken. Broke. Filled with doubt. I smiled. "I tell her she's not broken," I said. "She's becoming—" The circle went quiet. Then Lee May added softly, "I think I needed to hear that tonight." So did I. Honestly. Because even now, years into this journey, there are days I wake up and forget how far I've come. Days when the imposter syndrome creeps back in. When I look at a blank page and wonder if I still have something worth saying. But then I remember the ripple. The hands I've held, the voices I've lifted, the fires I've helped spark, and I know that is the work. Not the ego-driven chase for relevance, but the humble commitment to remain present, actually WS, to keep showing up for the next dreamer, the next outcast, the next Luna. A few weeks ago, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. It simply said, "You don't know me. But because of a podcast you were on 3 years ago, I didn't end my life that night. I started a garden instead. And that garden grew enough food to feed 3 families in my neighborhood this year. I just wanted you to know. Thank you for staying." I held that letter to my chest for a long time. Sometimes, we think our stories need to be loud to be heard. But sometimes, the quietest moments leave the deepest marks. So, here's what I've learned. Success is not the destination. Legacy is what happens in the spaces you least expect, in the lives you touch when you're not even trying, in the courage you give others by simply surviving, in the way your light keeps burning long after you've walked away. The applause fades. The headlines fade. But the ripple lives on. And today? I carry the torch not as a symbol of arrival, but as a promise. To keep walking. To keep lighting the way. To remind the next soul staring into the darkness, you are not alone. You are not behind. You are becoming Arsen. And becoming is enough. Hello again. My name is Luna. And if you've made it this far, I want you to pause. Not just scroll. Not just listen, pause. Because what I'm about to say isn't polished for applause or crafted for virality. It's real. It's personal. It's the truth. I wish someone had whispered to me when I was on the bathroom floor of a rundown apartment, staring at cracked tiles, wondering if my life was ever going to mean something. So if you're in that place right now mentally, emotionally, spiritually, this is for you. You are not your failures. You are not your debt, your rejections, your heartbreaks, or the labels others slapped on you when they couldn't see your full picture. You are a seed. And yes, right now, you might feel buried. But maybe, just maybe, this is not the end. Maybe this is where you begin to grow. I know what it's like to sit in silence, watching the world move forward while you feel stuck. I know what it's like to question everything, to wonder if your dreams were foolish, to shrink your voice just to make others comfortable. I did it for years. And yet, here I am. Not because I had it all figured out. Not because I had the right degree, the perfect pitch, or a roadmap to success. But because I kept going, even when it didn't make sense, even when I was terrified, even when no one was clapping. That's what no one tells you about purpose. It doesn't show up as a trumpet sound. It shows up quietly, in the choices you make when no one's watching, in the moment you say, I'll try again. In the moment you choose to believe that your voice, your story, your life still matters, even when it's messy, even when it's unfinished. Especially then, people often ask me, Luna, when did you know you made it? And my honest answer is, I never made it. Because making it isn't a destination. It's a mindset. It's waking up each day and saying, today, I will live with purpose. Even in the small things. Even when it's hard. Even if no one notices. Making it is walking into rooms where no one looks like you and refusing to shrink. It's staying when it's easier to run. It's forgiving yourself. Again and again. For not being perfect. It's choosing to be a light even when you're still healing in the dark. If I could leave you with one final image, it would be this: a girl sitting on a train with everything she owned in a single backpack. No money. No contacts. Just a fire inside that refused to go out. That girl was me. But the fire is you. That stubborn belief that you were made for more? Hold on to it. Feed it. Protect it. Because one day, someone will look at you and say, if they did it, maybe I can too. And in that moment, your scars will become someone else's survival guide. That is legacy. That is purpose. That is power. Not the kind you wear on a stage or put on a business card, but the kind that cannot be taken from you. So if you're wondering what to do next, start messy, afraid, underqualified. Just start. The people who make the biggest waves aren't the ones who waited for perfect timing. They're the ones who dared to step in while the tide was still crashing. And when you do, I promise you there will be moments when you feel seen. There will be nights when your words reach someone you'll never meet. There will be mornings when you wake up and realize you became the person your younger self needed. So, from my heart to yours, let me say this: your voice is enough. Your dream is not silly. Your pain is not wasted. And your journey, especially the parts no one clapped for, is sacred. Now go. Build. Write. Lead. Fall. Rise. Shine. And when it's your turn to stand in front of a room, or whisper into a camera, or sit beside someone who's breaking, don't hold back. Tell them what you needed to hear when you were lost. Remind them they are still becoming, and becoming is a beautiful thing. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Not as followers, not as fans, but as fellow travelers in this messy, magnificent thing called becoming. I'm rooting for you. Always. With love, Luna.